Okay, so we should be recording now. It should be going live in just 1 second. And then I just need to share it to our second little group. Okay, let me just let our last few people in. And it looks like we're streaming it now. So it's good. Okay, looks like we're ready to start. Chad, did you have anything you wanted to share before we began?
I'll say aloha to everyone. And one reminder for our current students that are joining us is that our field director applications are due in a couple of weeks. If you're interested in coming to work with us, doing what TK is doing, or Julie or Maddie or Bella, we're going to have openings, some in the spring, some in the fall. And if you have any questions about that, you should have gotten an email from us. But if you put your email in the chat here, TK, I'm sure, can send out applications afterwards. And it's a 19-hour-a-week job with the McKay Center with a year commitment, and you'll be able to do a lot of cool peace building things. And we just encouraging people to apply if they can. And that's all. Excited to hear TK talking about self-deception today.
I guess I don't technically need my mask. All right, thank you, Chad. Anything else? Okay, great. I just realized I'm in a study room by myself. I don't need my mask on. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about self-deception. Let me just quickly share our the screen here and get this going. So today we're talking about self-deception. Now this module in this forum today marks a bit of a turning point for us in the Dangerous Love workshop. So previously we've been focusing in and talking on overcoming our fear of conflict itself, and how that can be, and how that stops us from being able to have constructive conflict. So I'm just going to let someone else in who's in the waiting room. Chad, are you planning to stay here the whole time?
Yes, I am.
Can I just make you co-host so you can let people in if they come in, so I don't have to? Would that be okay?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yep.
Anyway, like I was saying, we've been focusing so far on overcoming our fear of conflict itself, and how that has been producing a barrier that often makes it difficult for us to have constructive conflict and keeps us oftentimes in destructive patterns of conflict. Now we're moving on to the second step here with self-deception. We're going to start talking about overcoming our fear of the people we're actually in conflict with. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that fear is, and how Dangerous Love actually helps us overcome that fear that we hold of those people. So to start, I just want to ask you guys this question. What are some of the hangups we experience when bridging the gap between fear and love, and feeling fear versus feeling love for the people that we're in conflict with? What are some of your guys' thoughts about that?
I think some of the fear of experience, like trying to make things work with somebody is that they won't be receptive to you.
That's perfect. This fear that we have that people won't, reciprocate our efforts to have constructive conflict with them. Perfect. What other thoughts do you guys have? What are some of the things that cause us to have difficulty bridging this gap?
I know for me personally, a lot of times it's hard to be vulnerable with other people, or kind of like build trust with other people.
Yeah, especially if we've been in a conflict with someone for a long time, and it can be difficult to feel like this is someone I really feel comfortable opening up to. Thank you, Carly, from the car. That's dedication. Great. Any other thoughts about that? You know, what helps us make, what are some of the things that that cause this gap between fear and love?
I think one of them could be the lack of knowledge of how to close that gap.
Great. That's a great example. You know, we talked about that a lot, especially when overcoming our fear of conflict itself, that sometimes just knowing more about how all of this works provides a huge ability to start bridging it. Okay, great. So all of these are really great aspects of what is going to help us and overcome this fear, but also kind of what does this fear consist of? You know, some of the ones we put up here is a lot of times we might say, you know, they won't change, or maybe I've had a bad experience in the past. And maybe sometimes even that I can't change. And so if we look at our conflict approaches that we talked about last time, you know, there's been almost a little bit this implicit assumption when we've talked about reconciliation or when we've talked about collaboration, you know, that that other people are going to reciprocate that. I think this is, you know, we just talked about that. I think Lena made that comment. There's this fear, there's this understanding that we think, you know, okay, like, you know, conflict's going to be constructive. If I'm going to want to collaborate, they're going to want to collaborate. If I want to reconcile, they're going to want to reconcile. And while we may feel that conflict is this constructive force, we may still hold a fear about other people that, you know, while I want to collaborate and reconcile, they're not going to. And there's this fear that, you know, I may put all this effort in, I may be vulnerable with this person, but they're not going to reciprocate those feelings. They're not going to collaborate with me, and they're not going to reconcile. And when we're in conflict with someone, that fear and that view can become so overwhelming and profound that it makes us feel like, you know, there's no point in trying to move to these later approaches to conflict. There's no point trying to transform it. There's no point trying to collaborate or reconcile, because this person is just never going to want to do it. And we create these distorted views of people because of our fear for them. And so, you know, we can have as great a cocoon view as we want, but if we can't overcome our fear of people, it's going to create a huge barrier to us being able to move towards that constructive conflict. And so you can see what we have here, you know, if we want to divide these two, you know, these approaches into two camps, you know, we can have avoidance, management, and resolution on one side, and then we can have transformation and reconciliation on kind of the love side. And we have these kind of fear and love sides here. Now, what separates them and you know, is what we call the gap. And this is separation and self-deception. And we're going to dive into what those two things are. But these two things are the things that first off make us feel, you know, like kind of throwing our hands in the air and saying, you know, there's no point in me trying to do this reconciliation because they're never going to want to do it. And it also is what causes us to hold on and create these really, you know, dehumanizing narratives about the people we're in conflict with that make us feel and make us really believe deeply sometimes that they're never going to want to do anything else than engage in these destructive patterns. So let's start with separation. So there's a couple different ways separation manifests itself in conflict. The first one is going to be physical distance. Now I just want you guys to think about, and maybe if anyone feels comfortable sharing, you know, how has physical distance manifested itself in conflicts you've had in your life?
I guess an example would be to avoid each other. Say, for instance, we're in school. We take different routes around the campus.
Perfect. You know, there can be. Oh no, sorry. Go on.
You're following you on Instagram.
You can. Someone else might quit following you.
No, how I would separate is I would quit following you on Instagram or social media, right? That's a way of me getting distance from you.
Okay, great. So that's one way we can create this distance. You know, we can distance ourselves on social media. There can also just be this uncomfortability of being with in someone's physical presence that we're in conflict with, and so we avoid that at all costs. Any other thoughts about how we create this physical distance?
I was thinking maybe in a sense of giving somebody the cold shoulder, or just not talking, you know, well, that when you just stop talking to them if you refuse to speak.
Great, yeah. So so we can just completely block them from our lives and ignore them whenever they try to reach out to us. Great. These are all ways that we kind of put up this physical distance. Now, how do you guys think physical distance reinforces the fear that we often have of these people in conflict?
TK, I have something. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Sometimes I think I work at a treatment center, and the thing that they teach the students here most is, about facing their problem, facing their fears, a lot of problems that they have with social anxiety or other things as well. But the thing that they teach them to do is actually to approach the problem and to use it. And I think that's probably the biggest problem we have with fear is we don't give ourselves enough distance to do that. And I think that's the biggest approach to doing dangerous love, is having that effort to approach the problem, even though we're scared to.
Great. Yeah. There's going to be this fear that's just implicit in, closing that gap. That's great. Any other thoughts about how physical distance reinforces our fear of people in conflict?
I feel like physical distance kind of strips people of their humanity, at least like from our point of view. So we kind of like place them in the box, or we don't really see them for who they are as a real person.
Great. So, that's a great point. We're going to talk more about specifically how we see people and that dehumanizing process that happens. But sometimes when we make that physical distance between people, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to have any humanizing experiences with them. And that causes us to just reinforce whatever dehumanizing narratives we have with them. Okay, great. So those are all ways that plays out with physical distance. Now let's move on to emotional distance. Now, what are some ways you think, maybe in conflicts you've seen or conflicts in your own life that, we put up emotional distance with people that we're in conflict with?
ETK.
Yeah.
Would emotional distance count as pushing someone away by being angry at them? Or
Sure.
is that physical distance? Oh, okay.
They're related. These are all forms of separation. So there's an interlink between them, definitely.
Okay. What was your original question?
In what ways do we put up emotional distance with people that we're in conflict with?
Maybe in a way you may push them away, I guess. Maybe not physically, but set up social barriers.
Yeah, definitely. It can be all those kind of things, like social barriers and stuff. The way I like to think about emotional distance is I feel like, we're going to talk about our narratives of other people, but I think there's this resistance to having empathy for the people that we're in conflict with. And we put up emotional distance by refusing, even when bad things may happen to them, or we might see humanizing experiences for them, we reject it. And we say instead, we ascribe some other reason to it, and we're just resistant to any form of experience of empathy for that person. That's at least how I like to think about we put up emotional distance. Anyone else have any other thoughts about that?
I was just going to add, I was thinking of it in a different way than what you mentioned, but what you mentioned, obviously makes more sense because you're the one teaching. But I was just thinking, sometimes we can shut other people out by, not letting them see how we're feeling or our personal emotions. We just use I'm fine, and we don't actually express how we're feeling, and we don't let that person into our lives in that way.
No, that's a great addition. I don't want you guys just to feel like, I'm giving all the answers to this. This is just how I think about this, but I think there's a lot of different ways to think about how these things play out, and all of them are valid. And I think that's actually a really good point, that sometimes the emotional distance kind of works the other way, where we refuse to let people kind of experience or feel empathy for us because we refuse to open up emotionally. That's a great way to think about emotional distance as well. And how do you guys think emotional distancing then reinforces that fear of conflict? Or if not fear of conflict, sorry, we moved on from that. Reinforces our fear of the people we're in conflict with.
I guess in a way, by putting distance in general, we avoided the truths of our issues with people, and it just justifies our fears. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Like we can reinforce those narratives we have with people because, maybe if we're not opening up, we can say like, this person never, wants to hear our side of the story. They never really care about us, but in reality, we're the ones putting up the emotional distance. And so there are definitely ways that can play out. So the last one we're going to talk about for separation is something called cyber distance. Now, this is a term we're just going to, is really unique, I think, here. But cyber distance refers to this phenomena that, is becoming more prevalent, I think, in conflict in society, where on social media, and sometimes, it can just be through texting or other kind of things, where people feel more comfortable saying more vicious or more hostile things to people because it's on a cyber medium or a digital medium, like commenting on someone on Instagram or on Facebook. It's easier to get into these kind of comment wars with people. And there's this escalation of conflict that it just seems like it's easier to happen because of this cyber distance and these digital barriers that we have. Now, can anyone maybe think about how that maybe they've seen that in their own lives, or maybe they've seen that play out? I see a lot of people smiling at this one.
So if I may interject here,
Yeah.
I could be what you would call a heavy gamer, and I have had my fair share of competitive games, and I just know that, say for instance, League of Legends, CS:GO, there's a whole bunch of toxicity going between teammates and opponents, left and right. In fact, toxicity is such a big issue in the esports scene that it's still not solved, even though that there have been preventative measures. Like people, it is very true that people do feel more comfortable going to work with people online than IRL. And yeah. Oh, also another thing that, if we have time for, I tried to create a esports community in my high school, and note that although it may have seemed a good idea opportunity-wise, the people were all like 15, 16-year-olds, not very socially mature, and with the I guess cyber distance wise, people were shooting cuss words at each other, and I guess long story short, everybody blew up at everyone else, and the whole thing had to be shut down. So it's definitely true that people are more comfortable going to war. Now, those who are smart know this, and they know that it is best to not go to war with other people online because it's just the same as in real life, maybe even more, because you can be tracked online.
Yeah, so first off, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and that's a great example of how, like, in lots of different mediums on the internet, we just feel, for some reason, we feel more comfortable saying things that we otherwise wouldn't be comfortable saying, maybe if we're face to face with the person that we're talking to. And so this adds to conflict, like you said, like it can blow up in our faces because of that distance we feel. And how do you guys think that reinforces, again, how do you think that reinforces our fear of people?
I definitely think it just adds to it, because kind of to add on, like you're reading comments and the people, it's so easy to dehumanize one another because, you don't know their real name. You don't know what they look like, their face, their lives. All you know is like that one thing that they said. And And maybe that thing offended you. And so you like base the whole person on that one little thought or feeling that they had. And then I think that that kind of view that we have of people or tend to have of people online kind of leaks into real life. You know, someone says something that you don't agree with, and then you're just quick to jump and kind of get in like an attack mode or to start a conflict with them. So I think it's just slowly kind of dehumanizing one another.
Yeah, and great. That's a great point that, a lot of times part of the reason this gets so crazy is because we have such limited information at times with which to understand other people. Whereas, if we have a real relationship with someone, if it's a family member or even just a friend that we're in conflict with, there's all this other stuff, that we've probably had experiences with. But a lot of times online, really all we have is that one interaction, that one thing they said or posted that offended us. And it makes it really easy to dehumanize them because that's all they are to us. And they don't have a face, and we may not know their real name. It's just that one thing. So that's great. So all these things of separation help play into this fear of people that we have. When we're in conflict with someone, this fear that we have that they won't reciprocate our efforts to have constructive, constructive peace building or constructive conflict with them. So this leads us to our second kind of part of the gap, part of the thing that makes it difficult to make this transition. This is self-deception. Now, self-deception inhibits our ability to love dangerously in two main ways. First off, it deceives us about ourselves and our own role in the conflict. And secondly, it deceives us about the true nature of those we're in conflict with. Now, if we think about the first way self-deception works, the classic definition of self-deception is having a problem and not knowing I have a problem, and resisting any suggestion that I have a problem. We say things like they're the problem, they need to change, and whatnot. And this becomes problematic for a conflict. And so why do you think this form of self-deception makes constructive conflict difficult? How do you think this plays into that gap that we've been talking about?
The first thing I think of, TK, is when we're in conflict, we don't realize it takes, we hear that phrase, it takes two to tango. So usually when we have that self-deception, we of course pin it on the other person, but then forget there could be things that are impeding your perception or your mindset that actually may be contributing to that collusion or problem as well.
Definitely. Great. Any other thoughts about this?
TK, I think this kind of makes you see people as objects when you do that. It's easier for you to blame others. I'm on my phone, so I don't know if you can see me or not. I'm sorry.
We can see you.
Okay. Yeah. So I think self-deception helps us, or kind of like makes us view people as objects, and making it easier for you to fall deeper into that self-deception, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to talk specifically about seeing people as objects in a minute here. That's the other side of the coin of self-deception. But definitely, and the one of the ways that I like to think about the reason this form of self-deception, when we deceive about our own role in the conflict is so difficult is, just like we were talking about a second ago, is we start to, like Morgan was saying, we believe that, it's really all the other person's fault. And we are blind to any sort of contribution that we have to the conflict. Now, but I think this does something significant to how this conflict plays out, is we also start to sacrifice any power that we believe we have to change the conflict. When we put the responsibility completely on the other person, we start to say, nothing's going to change in this conflict until they change. They started it, and for whatever reason, it's going to be up to them to improve it and move us along on this process. And we start to, by sacrificing our responsibility for the conflict, we also start to sacrifice our ability and our responsibility to end the conflict and have a role in moving it towards, constructive, these constructive patterns that we've been talking about. So that's the first one. Now we're going to talk about self-deception. This is right, just like Lynn was talking about, how we see others when we engage in self-deception. And so one of the ways we can think about this is, we have up here you and an object. So you can think about this as you're human being, you're a person. And then there's this object as well. We put up a basketball that was just an arbitrary object that we could put up there. And so what are the differences between this object and you as a human being?
I can think. I have a heart.
Okay, we think, we have a heart. Okay, great. What are some other differences?
Now you could throw objects in the trash, you don't think too much about it, right?
Yeah, great. We can throw objects around, like we don't need to worry about them or think about them or have any regard for them. We can do whatever we want with those objects. Great. Any other thoughts?
I have feelings where an object doesn't.
Yeah, we as people, we have feelings and objects don't. Perfect. Other thoughts? There's no right or wrong answers here. We're just brainstorming here.
I tend to care a lot more about myself than I do about objects.
Great. Yeah, there's much more importance that's placed on me as a human being than there is on objects. So these are all great differences that we see we have, between us and objects. And this helps us define a little bit what we're going to call an I-thou relationship and an I-it relationship. And these are just different ways that we see people. And so you can think about, there's I in both. So I is me. And we can either see someone as a thou or we can see someone as an it. So if we think about I-it, we'll start there. Other people are objects to us, just like we just talked about. And there are a couple different ways actually that we can see someone as an object. So the first way is we can see them as someone who helps me get things that I want. And so we can think about this, we call this often sometimes a tool or a vehicle to something. Does anyone have maybe, an example, maybe they feel like they've seen someone else as this type of object?
People, I guess, in the business world who all they want is monetary success. They will view people who they feel inferior to them as stepping stones to get where they want. They'll take advantage of them and just will do anything to get to success, to get to the top.
Great, definitely. So there can be these people that we just, they're stepping stones. They're just rungs to a ladder to help me progress in society. Just noticed we're actually, halfway through our time for the day. So I think I need to pick it up. I don't know if we're halfway through our presentation here. So we're just going to go through these a little bit more quickly. And so that was seeing people as tools. So now another way we can see people as objects and its is they get in the way of what I want. And this one's probably a lot more prevalent in conflicts that we experience in our lives, is we feel people are impeding us in some way or getting in our way. And then the last one is they don't actually do either. They don't help us or they don't hurt us. And so they're irrelevant to us, and we just see them as not important. So all of these ways are different ways we see people as an it, where their needs, fears, hopes, and humanity don't matter to me, and in some ways oftentimes don't exist to me. They're like we talked about, we just can treat objects any way we want because they don't possess these things. And in that same sense, people don't count the same as me. And so who am I focused on when I have this perspective of seeing someone as an it?
On yourself.
Yeah, we're focused on ourselves. I see people pointing to themselves. Yeah, and this is self-preservation that we've talked about a few times before here, where everything we do is focused inward on ourselves. And we often say here, there is no we, there's only me in the conflict. And, okay, now going back to what we've been talking about with this fear that we have of people, how does seeing someone as an it reinforce and create in many ways this fear of another person?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Yeah, of course. So how does seeing someone as an it, create and reinforce this fear that we have of people when we're in conflict with them?
We don't see their humanity. We don't see their true emotions that we may need to consider when in conflict with them.
Yeah, so we don't see any of their humanity that exists. One of the ways I like to think about this is when we see someone as an object and as an it, it's really easy to assume the worst about these people and ascribe a lot of negative attributes to this. If you've been reading Anatomy of Peace, we refer to this as kind of horribleization of people. And it's really easy to think, these people are terrible people. They're never going to want to collaborate with me. They're never going to want to reconcile with me because, for all these reasons that we have about them that makes them a bad person. And when we can't see their humanity and instead we see them as an object, it's really easy to dehumanize them in that way and create these kind of narratives. So that's I it. Now, the other side of this is I thou. And we can just see, we'll put that right up next to the I it relationship. What are the differences you already see here between these two?
Instead of an object, there are two human beings. And the arrow is pointing to both.
Great. Yeah. So, we're both people in this kind of relationship when we see people as a thou. And the arrow goes both ways. There's this reciprocation between us. And, really what it is, we value both our own needs, which we did in I it, but what we lacked in I it was also this value of other people's needs and other people's humanity. And so when we see someone as a thou and we're in this I thou relationship, we value both of our humanities and both of our needs. And just like we said, other people's needs, fears, hopes, and humanity matter to me. Other people count the same as me. And who am I focused on here? Both. Yeah, perfect. There's this us preservation that's going on. We're valuing both of us. And we say in this, there is no me, there's only we. And what do you think the difference is going to be when we're engaging in conflict with people? What do you think the difference is going to be if we see them as a thou versus if we see them as an it?
We see their value, and probably easier to fight, transform conflict.
Definitely, it's going to be a lot easier to transform conflict with someone who we believe is a human being and has these hopes, these needs, and this humanity, than if we just think of an object. There's no object that's going to want to transform conflict with us, but there probably are people that will. Great. Any other thoughts about that? Okay, that's good. So now we want to talk a little bit about, okay, so we've talked about I it and I thou, and kind of, oh, wait, there's one more thing on here. Let me remember this. So this is how this relates back to self-deception. So this says the primary way self-deception deceives us is by convincing us that the people we are in a relationship with during conflicts aren't actually people at all. Instead, they are objects. And the deception part of self-deception arises from the fact that people are actually people, not objects, no matter how badly they're treating us or we are treating them. So that's how that relates to self-deception. Now we've been talking about I thou and I it. And what we want to do now is we want to kind of relate this back to dangerous love and how dangerous love is going to be one of the things that helps us overcome this fear of people that we have and ultimately help us have an I thou kind of relationship and view of people. Before we move on to that, does anyone have any questions about anything we've talked about so far? No? Okay. Everyone's just so excited to go on. Great. Okay. So now what we're going to do is in order to understand this, there's going to be a couple things we're going to do. First off, we're going to put I thou and I it on a spectrum. And what that means is, we kind of talked about them as these two things. We can see people as people, we can see people as objects. And instead of thinking instead of thinking about these two things as two absolutes, it's one or the other, we're going to talk about, there actually can be some gray area between them. we can actually be, kind of in the middle. We can kind of be a little bit more on one side or the other. We can be deeply on one side or the other. There's the spectrum of ways that we see I, thou, or I in. Now, another thing that we want to talk about in relating this to dangerous love is to add some nuance to this word love. In the English language, we only have one word to really describe this. And so we've talked about love and fear as kind of these two things, but we want to add a little bit more nuance to love and kind of talk about dangerous love. And in order to do that, we're going to talk about something else called easy love. And so we want to answer this question. What are some things that is easy for us to love in our life? It could be people who are easy to love, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but it could be pets, could be films, could be, clothes, could be food, could be material objects. What everyone just think for just a second about what are some things that are easy for you to love in your life?
Are you asking this question to us, or are you just wanting us to think about it? I'm sorry.
I want you to think about it, and then we're going to answer this question. What makes these things easy to love? So you can share what it was that you thought of, and then we can share about what made those things easy to love. So did anyone think of something that they thought, though this is really easy for me to love in life, and would anyone feel comfortable sharing that, and maybe sharing what makes that thing easy for you to love?
I can share one. Oh, or Lena, you can go.
No, you go.
I think my mom is the easiest person for me to love. And I think it's because she's just so sweet. And I think there are things that maybe are still like hard for me about her, but it doesn't affect the way my love for her, I guess.
So you feel like she expresses maybe a lot of love towards you?
Yeah, actually, she does. She's really good at making me feel loved.
Okay, great. Okay, Lennon, you wanted to share one?
Oh yeah, it's easy for me to love my grandbaby. She's only 7 months, and she's easy because she doesn't answer me back. She doesn't give me attitude. She's always happy to see me, and she just, because she's a baby, right? But for everybody else, sometimes it's hard to show love to them because they do all those things. Sorry.
That's a great example. Okay, what else? What are some other things that are easy for us to love?
It's not a person.
That's okay.
I love to read people, but I really love animals. It's just so easy for me to love them. I think they're just, simple and cute, and they're just innocent.
Okay, great. Anything else? Things that are easy to love?
I think it's easy to love food.
Perfect. What makes it easy to love?
I think it's easy to love things that you know are gonna benefit you, or you gain something from them,
Okay, great.
But yeah, I think it's important to realize that relationships do the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a great point. There can be relationships that look similar to that, where we know we're going to benefit from being in that relationship. We're going to get something out of it. And it can be easy to love that person, that relationship, because, we're receiving something as part of it. Great. So now I want to think about, some of these things weren't people, some of these were people, but, there's important comparisons, even on the examples that aren't people. About the kind of relationships that can be easy to love. And so what do you think some people, we've talked about a few examples, but I just want to, really talk about this. What makes some people easy to love?
If they love you back.
If they love us back, perfect. What else? What else makes people easy to love?
We're not scared of getting hurt by them.
We feel really safe around them. We're not scared of getting hurt by them. Perfect. What else?
I think when they agree with our perspectives, and it's kind of like an echo chamber, and they, it's easy to get along with them.
Beautiful. When people agree with us, it's very easy to get along with them. So now, thinking about all those things, I want you to think about this question. Where is, if we were looking at the spectrum of I thou versus error, where do you think easy love falls on the spectrum?
It.
UK thinks Zayat. Anyone else?
I guess it would depend on what it is that you love, right?
Okay. Yeah. So when you think about people that are easy to love, do you think we see them as a thou or see them as it kind of where it is? Could depend, certainly. Any other thoughts on that?
If it's food, maybe it's an I it.
Maybe it's an I. Well, let's focus in on people that are easy to love here and think about Amanda.
I think I see them clearer when it's easy to love because I feel like they see me clearer.
Okay, that's a great point. So yeah, where we're going to put easy love is kind of right on the precipice, but in the I thou category. It's for that reason Amanda kind of talked about. When people are easy to love, it's really easy for us to see their humanity because their humanity is very similar to ours. When people agree with us and we share the same views of the world or of topics, when we have the same hobbies and things that we love, their humanity is very similar to ours. And so it's really easy for us to recognize that humanity as being valid and being real and being important because it reflects our own. Or when people are giving us love, it's really easy to feel like, it's really easy to love them because of that. But, easy love poses some problems that we're going to talk about. First off, a lot of times when we're in an easy love relationship, there's this feeling of content that we have. We don't feel like we need to do anything about the relationship because they're just so easy to get along with. We don't need to put a lot of effort into it. And so we can often feel content. And then part of the other downside of that is we can easily get shifted to I it. If that person disagrees with us, we have an argument. If we're kind of sitting there on the edge, we can easily just get pushed over and start seeing them as an object because of an argument we have. And so easy love exists, and we can see people as a thou in an easy when we're seeing them, or sorry, when we have an easy love relationship with them. But in terms of conflict with people, easy love runs away in the face of conflict. Once we start fighting with people, once our viewpoints start diverging, we just get shoved right down and seeing them as objects. And so that brings us to dangerous love. So now, where do you think dangerous love is on our spectrum of I thou versus I it?
I thou.
Yeah, hopefully it's on I thou. That'd be a little bit weird if we're going to turn here and say it's now an I it. So the dangerous love now moves us a little further into I thou. But there are some interesting things that are different about dangerous love when we compare it to easy love. First off, it's harder to move backwards. There's this resistance when we're practicing dangerous love for someone that makes it hard for us to start moving back down the spectrum and moving towards an I perspective. And the reason that is because intrinsic and as part of dangerous love, there's this deliberate and constant effort that we have to move further down into the I thou category. We recognize when we're practicing dangerous love that we can always be better about seeing someone as a person or seeing them as a thou. And so we put time and energy into cultivating that view of them. And that makes it hard for us to get pushed back into it. And it doesn't mean that we're immune to it, but it makes it a lot harder. And so how do you think when we're practicing that kind of dangerous love, how do you think that helps us overcome this gap that we talked about at the beginning?
I think we're more conscious and aware of that. So then we actively strive to close that gap.
Great. So we can be aware of it and know it's there. And that's one of the great things about, learning from these workshops. We talked about that, sometimes just knowing what's out there and what's going on can help us overcome it. Great. So let's think about this. What are some other ways that, dangerous love helps us overcome separation? What are some ways dangerous love helps us overcome self-deception? What do you guys think about that?
It helps you recognize the other as a person. It helps you get rid of any of the fears that we have towards separating ourselves with other people. It stops us from deceiving ourselves with lies, and in doing so, we move ourselves towards transforming our social dynamic with the other person.
Definitely, yeah. So when we have dangerous love for someone, it can drive us to decrease the distance that we have between us and that other person, and to start closing that separation, closing the gap in that way. When we think about self-deception, dangerous love can help us recognize, our own role in the conflict. It can also start helping us be able to engage in transformation and reconciliation. So, we're going to talk about this a lot more in another module, but I want us just to think about this, briefly here. When we're in a conflict with someone, and we talked at the beginning, we have this fear that the other person won't reciprocate how our efforts to collaborate or reconcile with them. And so we just, we throw our hands in the air and we say, like we're just going to stick with avoiding or managing or whatever it is, because they're just not going to change. If we do that, what are the chances, do you think, that that conflict is going to turn constructive?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sorry. So if we, if we believe that people aren't going to want to transform conflict with us, and and we decide, we're not even going to bother trying to collaborate with them or reconcile with them, and we just stay, we keep avoiding or managing. So we decide, because of this person, we don't think they're going to reciprocate us. We just decide to keep doing what we've always been doing. What are the chances that that conflict's going to turn to constructive conflict? Does that make more sense? Maybe this is a confusing question.
Yeah, it does. I'd say none. Be reduced to nothing.
Right, yeah, there's probably no chance that we're going to be able to have constructive conflict with that person. But what about if we start having dangerous love for that person? We start to, recognize maybe our own role in the conflict, and we start to, see them as a thou and as a person. We start practicing dangerous love. What are the chances now that that conflict is going to turn constructive?
It improves from the original state, and over time it'll get better.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it is, it's not zero now. And so, whether we think, that chance goes up to 50% or 60%, or maybe we just think it goes up to 20%, whatever the chance is, it improves. And by being able to have dangerous love, we start to move ourselves and start to help move the conflict we're experiencing towards a constructive pattern, being able to have conflict transformation, being able to collaborate, being able to reconcile. So last thing for today, this is something that I just want to, have you guys leave with and have you guys take a minute to think about, which is, when have I seen someone as an I-it in my life? And when has someone else seen me as a thou and had an I-thou perspective towards me? And so with that, that's going to be the end of our workshop for today. Or I guess not, I guess it's a workshop, the end of our forum at least. Does anyone have any questions about anything we've talked about for today before we end? Okay, sounds like a no. So, all right, you guys are free to go. Thank you so much for coming, and hopefully we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.